all of the angels are observing, so that sex that's so amazing, because it's amazing to the angels because they don't have physical bodies. And in Genesis chapter 6, somehow these spirit beings who are of a higher intellect than humans managed to actually make babies with physical human women. And those babies ended up being strange hybrids, and they were giants, and they became an enormous problem, and they were hurting the human family. And it was like this whole crazy, terrible thing that happened from fallen angels. And guess what? The early Christians understood that this is still happening. Spirit beings can select women and just use them to mislead the family and the men. The women are not evil. They are just so beautiful and so amazing and such a treasure and such beautiful servants and helpers and insightful ones that they can easily be used to draw human beings away from the path of friendship with God. So there's an enormous, enormous warning, control, difficulty about the female human beings and how troubling spirits can use them in ways that no one is aware to just start pulling things in the wrong direction. Extreme caution is advised. And that stuff went away with Constantine. It went away with Augustine. It went away in all these seasons of church where it all turned into a Jesus information business. The teachings of Christ were forgotten. And the Spirit of Christ was not carrying the fullness of how to gather in an intimate, private meeting with men who were completely cheerful and honest about their crazy weaknesses. Women have crazy weaknesses in one way, and men have crazy weaknesses in other ways. And rich people have crazy weaknesses in some ways, and poor people have crazy weaknesses in other ways. And spiritually trained and people of intellect who have studied, they have certain kinds of evils. And people who are not trained or not spiritually trained have different types of evils. And younger people have a certain kind of evils. And elder people, if they don't say a darn thing and they see a younger person doing something that's really dangerous, and the elder person doesn't say a darn thing, Ezekiel 3, Ezekiel 33, and Ezekiel, 15 or 18. A person who knows and sees trouble coming in is responsible to speak up. And if they don't speak up, the people who get into the trouble will be hurt, but the person who understood the problem will be also held responsible. And that's Adam and that's Ahab. You women are off the hook. The women are less harshly judged. Everything is to focus on the men, the men, the men. And when the men are casting off guidelines of Christ, if you men have the audacity to think that those words, a woman disgraces her man, her men, her sons, her pastors, her uncles, her grandfathers, a woman brings trouble and spiritual stupidity on the men when she prays and prophesies in the private meeting, which is a deep connection with God, the Holy of Holies, the new mercy seat of the new covenant. When she prays and prophesies with her head uncovered, that hurts the men. And when the men pray and prophesy with their heads covered, they're saying, oh, it's like Jesus was never crucified and the veil was never torn. The veil was torn. That was the indicator that the men can take the prayer shawl off their heads and walk straight into the presence of Elohim, Yahweh. And the women are more powerful than every single high priest, every single prophet that ever lived. All the kings of Israel are lesser. King David is lesser than one woman who is in Yehoshua and under the blood. So the women, with the gesture of the prayer shawl, full of the Holy Spirit, teamed up with the men in a private meeting, going into the presence of Elohim. This is a powerful symbol and a sign, and I have never been taught that set of things by anyone in churchianity. And I'm done. I'm finished. In 2018, Father said, no more holding hands with and rubbing elbows with people in churchianity who are choosing not to follow all of the basic details that the people of the first 300 years were following. I know so many people who are high intellect and much information. David Berceau and Michael Heiser are two great examples. But there is literally a rejection of the powers of the Holy Spirit. There's a disinterest and a coldness towards the powers of the Holy Spirit. There is no fervent instruction that the little gatherings that are closed are the new nation of the new covenant that battles against the dark nations of all this world. The nation of Israel is now one of the dark nations. Since Yeshua has come, every single person is responsible to connect with Yeshua, who is now the new Garden of Eden. Connecting with Yeshua is the new life beginning for all peoples, Jew and Gentile. The history of the law is fascinating. The history of the lineage of Moses and all of the other characters is fascinating. But I'm telling you, the Egyptians and the Ugartic people and the Mesopotamian people, way back in history, they were smarter about the darn demons that run human beings than my American Christians who have tons and tons of ability to research. They're not even spending time working in the supernatural. They're just running information, and they're literally like puffed up with knowledge, and they have not walked on water. They have not walked into the woods to be filled with Ruach HaKodesh. This is all a very dangerous thing. And I will give instruction to the precious one who has had such an abused life and who spent ages off on a sailboat and who has been isolated, and her mind has been filled with so many adversarial, hateful, attacking things. It is not the design to be a soldier. The violence of humans does not bring forth the righteousness of God, but rather humility and gentleness vanquishes the evil. And this is my example, and this is my word. This is my time to say, heads up. I am a learner, and I've been a learner for 28 years. I am still only a humble learner, but you can come now and learn from me if you want to care for the next generation and teach them how to deal with their pleasure and their physiology. Teach them how to deal with the battles of the spirit realm. Teach them how to utilize Ruach HaKodesh, and teach them how to teach all the principles of Yeshua for the two types of meetings. Please repeat after me. The early disciples for 300 years. The early disciples for 300 years. The early disciples for 300 years had two types of meetings. Very public meetings in markets, in parks, in very public places. They had very public meetings, and they had extremely private meetings, only of people who have died to themselves and are willing to be killed and tortured today because of their immersion in Yeshua. Those are the two types of meetings. Now, rise up and build the private meetings where men can describe their demons and the women and the children can rest in a cheerful, marvelous family that's having a great time, healing the sick, raising the dead, discerning and pushing away spirits, and speaking supernaturally from heaven about many, many, many wise things. Inviting people into the wild relationship with the Most High God. That's the game, and it's very pleasant.